The Nigerian Agribusiness Group, NABG, is proud to host the inaugural Presidential Roundtable PRT on February 21, 2025 at the Transcorp Hilton in Abuja. This high-level dialogue platform will bring together key policymakers, industry leaders and critical stakeholders from across the agribusiness ecosystem to drive forward strategic discussions that will shape the future of Nigeria's agricultural sector. The PRG serves as a vital forum for fostering collaboration between the public and private sectors, aiming to align government policies with the priorities of the agribusiness industry. The discussions will cover a range of pressing topics, from climate-smart agriculture and agricultural financing to supply chain optimization and policy reforms. It is designed to ensure that the collective efforts of policymakers, agribusiness leaders, and stakeholders can be harnessed for meaningful, actionable outcomes that advance food security, agricultural competitiveness, and economic growth. This inaugural event will also see the presentation of key policy briefs to the presidency, with special emphasis on tomato, seed, dairy, and agro-commodity standards gradings, areas NABG has been actively working on. The PRT is set to become a quarterly platform that will continue to elevate the dialogue around critical policies and innovations in the agricultural space, enabling a more sustainable, competitive, and vibrant sector. So, join us for this unique opportunity to engage directly with the key influencers driving Nigeria's agribusiness transformation. This is the beginning of a new chapter in shaping the future of agriculture in Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ikaria Clinton, and welcome to Nigeria Today. Now, with me in the studio for this conversation is Jafar Abubakar Umar. He's the Director General, Nigerian Agribusiness Group. It's a pleasure to have you in Nigeria Today.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
That's a very, very, will I say, innovative thing that is about to happen in the country. Now, but before we go into what is about to take place, tell us, how significant is agribusiness to Nigeria economy?
I mean, agribusiness is the backbone of Nigeria's economy, so to speak, because agriculture and business comes together to form agribusiness. Agriculture employs 70% of Nigeria's labor force, contributing over 25% of its GDP. It's only proper that agriculture, now agribusiness, is taken a lot more serious because of its contribution to the national economy. And given the present situation of food insecurity in Nigeria today, agriculture has never been more important, and agribusiness stands at the focal point of agriculture and sustainability in the country.
Now, back to what is about to happen. You talked about, we see that will be a collaboration between the public and private sector in addressing, in addressing the challenges Nigeria faces in achieving food security. Now, what role do you see this playing, this collaboration?
So, I guess a bit of background is important here. There are so many players, so many moving parts within the agricultural sector. Several sectors, subsectors, anything from primary production to processing to logistics and transportation to retail, different value chains, different things happening within the sector. But there is also the other side of agriculture, which is the public sector. The public sector rolls out policies, rolls out guidelines, basically sets the rules of the game in agriculture. But it's then very weird that you have these two groups not speaking to each other as much as they need to. So government doles out policies that the private sector has to adhere to. Now, whether those policies are right, they are relevant, they are timely, or they're even responsive to the private sector is another conversation entirely. So for us, this forum is very, very significant because it brings together both parties together in the same room, on the same platform, to converse. Some of the priorities of the private sector, as championed by the Nigeria Agribusiness Group, which we lead, would bring forth these conversations. We'll talk about the relevance of some of these things and how these policies affect the private sector. The public sector would now have first-hand information about how these things work, and we hope together the private sector and the public sector would work out sustainable solutions to ensure we harness the various opportunities and the power of agriculture that Nigeria holds.
Okay, we hear about, you talked about the area of climate smart. You know, how can Nigeria ensure, you know, that its agricultural policies are aligned with the global best practices, especially in this area of, you know, climate smart? You talked about, you know, agriculture, of course, and of course, sustainability.
Exactly. So, I mean, the world has moved. Nigeria needs to move as well. You go to the field, you find our farmers still engaging in practices ages ago. Same practices that our great-grandfathers have been practicing. But it is not giving us the right production in terms of volume. It is not being efficient. It is harmful to the soil and the environment as a whole. So the need for our farmers to make that shift to climate-smart agriculture is very, very critical for us at this point. I mean, we're all witnesses to the different calamities that we face, from excessive rainfall to inadequate rainfall, from flooding to drought in some areas, soil erosions, different emissions that are happening, and our agriculture tends to contribute to that. But with all this happening, there is a gap in terms of the policy environment for climate-smart agriculture. So this PRT, through NABG, we are bringing forth a policy framework to say, this is what we think the public sector needs to put in place as rules for how we do agriculture in the different value chains, especially those that have an effect on the environment. So we are proposing these policy frameworks to the listening ear of the public sector, so they understand and they put in these rules in place, because government has the sole responsibility of enforcement to ensure that it facilitates the movement from conventional agriculture that we are currently engaging to more climate smart, more climate friendly, more climate responsive types of agriculture. So there will be a panel during the presidential roundtable that would discuss these things. And given the high level participation that we're expecting at that roundtable, we are confident that they would take up some of these solutions that have been brought forward, some of these policy frameworks that we are proposing, with a view to continue working on them, and the NABG would ensure that this happens even after the roundtable.
Now, we're talking about agriculture in Nigeria. We know we have a lot of you know, households that are into agriculture. Yeah. Although some of them are not really into it for the business, they just want to feed their families. We have quite a lot of farmers, but you know, we're still fighting to achieve food security. Now, and most of these farmers are in the rural areas. Now you talk about a roundtable. How can these benefit these rural farmers that would want to make agriculture a business?
Excellent question. So this is why the roundtable we're having is all-inclusive. It doesn't just include the big agribusinesses or just the ministries, departments, and agencies that will come in. It also has representatives of commodity associations, so associations of farmers that produce various crops. It has representatives of young people who are interested in going into different value chains in agriculture. The idea behind this is that we create as much information and knowledge about the future of agriculture and agribusiness in Nigeria in a way that it cascades down. The Nigeria Agribusiness Group itself is a business membership organization. It's an organization that is constituted by different players within the agribusiness sector. So for the farmers that are in the rural communities who may not have the opportunity to participate in this roundtable, can also benefit from its outcomes, especially through its commodity associations. Let me give an example. If the Rice Farmers Association, who is going to be represented at that roundtable, are part of the discussions of the transition from normal conventional ways of planting rice to more climate-friendly systems of rice intensification, we are confident that through their vast network, this conversation will now go down to the local farmers. We have companies that provide extension services to farmers that would be attending that presidential roundtable, that would get first-hand information about the future of climate smart agriculture and specific value chains, and will take that information down to the farmers that are at the rural level, so that we begin to consciously shift to more climate, more productive ways of planting, more productive ways of doing agriculture as a whole.
Now, we'll take a short break now. The conversation will continue after the break. Don't go away.
The implementation of the ruling is also dependent on another aspect or another arm of government.
Nowhere in the world will allow under digital economy for banks not to be dispensing domestic currency in that economy.
What will make this one different?
We want to know what they do as occupation. All of these are attributes that our questions have been designed to investigate.
In a few days to come, you see that we are all around their own crannies and everywhere in Nigeria, telling people to cooperate.
Welcome to Nigeria Today. Welcome back. This is still Nigeria Today, and we are talking about agribusiness, as it were. And of course, we have here with us the Director General of Nigerian Agribusiness Group, Jafar Umar. Now, Jafar, of course, you've told us how the rural people will benefit, rural farmers really will benefit from this. But what innovative financing solutions should be explored to increase investment, in Nigeria's agribusiness sector, particularly the rural areas, because this is where the, will I say, the most of the farming takes place.
So when it comes to financing in agriculture, it's quite complex, especially the Nigerian financial industry itself. The issues around profiling of people who can access finance is still a challenge right now. There's a lot of work being done to ensure that those who are technically excluded from access to finance are being brought into the financial net, but that's still work being done, especially for those in the rural farmers, because for you to access finance, you need to have a bank account. To have a bank account, you need to have BVN. To have BVN, you need to have NIN. To have this, and those services are technically not available in most rural communities. So work is being done by several government agencies, private organizations, and even commercial banks by themselves to ensure we bring as many people into the financial net as possible. Now, that being said, if a number of farmers are now eligible to access finance, since most of this financing is not free money, how do we ensure they understand that this is monies that you are supposed to use to do business and pay back?
I'm disciplined enough to do that.
Disciplined enough to do that, because that takes a business mind. So a lot of work is still being done to sensitize our farmers in those ways. However, there are some successful models that are actually working now in the system, mostly through agribusinesses. So in some cases, you have outgrower schemes where an agribusiness would have a number of farmers attached, cluster of farmers attached to the agribusiness as suppliers. That agribusiness would finance these farmers, would give them the seed, would give them the fertilizer, would give them the pesticides and whatever is necessary to do proper agriculture, and they pay back in commodities after harvest. In other cases, you have models like the in-grower, where beyond just giving those inputs, you actually give them the land. That way they don't have to go and lack out for anything. Some of these models have proven very, very successful. And at the NABG, we have the interest to promote those successful models so that more agribusinesses are able to use it for their farmers without waiting for government to come and give money or give fertilizer or give seeds to farmers. Agribusinesses can lead the way to ensure that farmers have access to a lot of these inputs so that agriculture can happen. But for that to happen, the agribusinesses themselves need to feel a lot of confidence, need to know that the farmers they are going to work with are genuine, responsible, and have the discipline to use those resources to do agribusinesses, not just agriculture, and pay back in a way that both the agribusiness and the farmers benefit. We have championed a new model which we'll be unveiling during the PRT called the National Integrated Agribusiness Agenda. It's a tripartite arrangement between the government on one side, local government in some cases, the agribusiness, and the farmers, where the three stakeholders come together, discuss and agree, create terms of engagement, and everyone is held accountable. They hold each other accountable to ensure they do business in a way that everyone benefits, and there are systems for, mitigating any conflicts that might come out of that relationship come back. We hope to present that to Mr. President as well during the PRT.
Okay, now tell us a little bit more about the PRT. We want to know how long will this PRT take, and what do you expect to see at the end of this, PRT?
Yes, the PRT is not a very long event. In fact, the one happening on the 21st, in 2 days' time, it's only a few hours, 2-3 hours at the most, because we don't believe in just talk shops. We want to discuss and go out to implement. So it's happening on Friday here in Abuja, and as you rightly mentioned, it's a gathering of different stakeholders, from government to the private sector leaders to commodity associations to young people to women organizations, all coming together to converse about some of the issues that affect agriculture and agribusiness as a whole. We would be talking about some very, very important topics to private sector companies, specific sector related activities. And at the end of that conversation, we want it to be that the public sector, government, from the presidency down to an extension officer in the local government, understands to a very large extent the plight of the private sector in those specific value chain areas. And that these are actions we are proposing that both the government and the private sector take on together, so that the entire sector becomes more responsive for everyone. Because we have a food insecure nation now, but the government, we know, is working really, really hard, and the private sector wants to complement that effort to ensure we have abundance of food, to an extent that we might even start helping our neighbors, not just ourselves, when it comes to food production and food consumption at the end of the day. So to answer your question directly, at the end of that PRT, there will be concrete steps that would have come out as a result of that conversation that would happen on Friday, where the public sector and the private sector would work together to ensure a more responsive agricultural sector for all.
Okay, now tell us that what role does technology play in ensuring we have, food security? Now, I ask this because in some other clans, take the US for instance, the percentage of farmers are very few, but they have food. Yeah. But here in the country, we have a lot of farmers, but we still suffer food insecurity. Yes. So what role exactly does technology play, and how are we adapting to the new technology to improve our agricultural sector?
I mean, the role of technology in agriculture and food production cannot be overemphasized. We have a lot of farmers, but as I mentioned earlier, we're still using hoe and cutlass to do food production. I mean, we are talking about 250 million people to feed with hoe and cutlass. It can't work. As my president, Dr. Kabir Ibrahim, would always say at any fora, by 2050, our population would have doubled. That means we need to significantly improve our systems of food production. And we can only do that if we embrace technology. I mean, we have millions and millions of hectares of land that is not being used. I took a drive at some point from Gombe State down to Yola, and I saw the vast land of the Numans around Adamawa State. And you only see a few people scattered across the land using their hoes and cutlass. Those areas should have tractors moving about, combined harvesters going into those lands, cultivating them to produce food for the country. But then the technology is available. I mean, we've seen several state governments, launching different programs with tractors and all of that. That's wonderful, that's good, but it's not nearly enough, because the question is, Those tractors, what do they run on? They run on diesel. They run on petrol. Those things are not cheap now in Nigeria. It's expensive. So you have to group farmers together to be able to provide those services. There are some mechanization service providers in the country now. They're not enough. We need more of them to target farmers in the rural communities who have small holding lands of 1 hectare, 0.5 hectare, and put them together and provide those services to them. It is only at that point, if we embrace mechanization technology, that we can improve our agriculture. At the same time, we can't keep relying on rain-fed agriculture, which we only get rain half the year. We need to be conscious in producing food all year round. That means our irrigation agriculture needs to be on point as well. So the private sector, the public sector at the federal, state, and local government level should think about how do we provide the relevant irrigation infrastructure, be it dams, be it waterways, be it solar pumping machines, be it tanks or reservoirs that are available for farmers to do all year round farming. Then we can talk about ensuring we have a food secure nation. We have our universities, bright minds all across the country, graduates of agricultural economics, agronomists, all ready to put in their quota to help develop this. We want to encourage both the private and the public sector to harness the young minds that we do have and the ideas that are coming out of some of these our tertiary institutions to make agriculture better.
Yeah, talking about the young minds, you know, the Gen Zs. Somebody once mentioned that even AI will also be helping in agriculture. Of course, you need the bright minds, you need the young ones to bring in that the vibe, you know, the Gen Z vibes and all of that. You know, what can be done to encourage these young people, because you know, presently some of them see agriculture as a dirty business.
Oh, yes.
You know, so how can they be? What kind of reforms can be in place, or policies can be in place to encourage these young people to go into, you know, agribusiness?
I think a movement has started already. I mean, last year, NABG went around, I personally and my team went around the 6 geopolitical zones and interacted with a number of young people. And you would be amazed as to the number of Gen Zs that actually see agriculture as a money-making opportunity, but simply don't understand how to engage. Some of them have cracked the code, some don't understand how to. You find that there are some Gen Zs who are using TikTok to promote buying and selling of agro-commodities. There are some Gen Zs that are using robotics to help with processing raw agricultural products that are coming out.
How can we tap into that as a country?
So as a country, what we need to do is give them the platform to grow. Make mistakes, but mistakes that you can learn from and grow further. That's why I said it's the role of both the public sector and the private sector to drive agriculture. And we should stop even, you know, media houses like the NTA promoting images of agriculture is important. Whenever you see agriculture is a man with a hoe, you know, with a raffia hat, tattered dress looking, you know, and you say agriculture and you say farmer. No Gen Z wants to associate himself with that. I saw a post on social media just this week that when doctors pose for a picture, they don't pose with bloody gloves and all that, right? They're in their white lab coats with the stethoscope, looking nice and looking presentable. Farmers should look that way as well. You don't have to show when you're actually getting your hands dirty, but show yourself in a nice kaftan, a nice suit.
Just like you are.
Well, that's the image we want to promote.
Yes.
And then young people would naturally want to aspire to that. So the image of agriculture that we currently have has to start changing. And we all have a role to play. At the NABG, we are doing our best. We have a very young team, and we are willing to engage any young person willing to play their role or present their quota of an idea and is looking for a platform. We're willing to use our platform, our membership base, to promote such young people. And I call on both government, agribusinesses, and the entire country to promote agriculture. And let's see it as the gold mine that it is.
Thank you very much, Jafar Abubakar Umar, the Director General, Nigerian Agribusiness Group. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the program. Remember, Nigeria Today airs every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can also watch this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24. I'm your carrier, Clinton. Goodbye.